I'm Professor Reboot, and in this hyper edition of MLA and text citations, I'm going to show you as quickly as I can how to form some of the most basic in-text citations for sources you might use in an academic paper. Sources are any types of materials that you refer to in terms of research, factual information, statistics, history, ethical theories, or really any information that you get from outside of yourself, such as artists, movies, films, even this video right now. To begin, we will cite and text a book with one author, and the book has page numbers. It does not matter if this book is a print book or a digital book. If it has page numbers, you do it as follows. First, you will choose whether or not in the body of your paper you will refer to the author as part of your signal phrase. That might be something like this. Julie Dirksen is an instructional designer. I have named her in my own text before I started this quotation that appears on page 74 of her book. Because I have named her in my text, the end citation, you'll notice, does not have punctuation inside the quotation because the citation itself has to be part of the sentence that it belongs to. So here I will put the page number in. It's actually 4, and the punctuation comes afterwards. Now let's say I'm going to refer to the author in a broader sense in my signal phrase before I quote her, but I'm not going to name her in the body of my work. In this case, it would look like this. Now, as you can see, my signal phrase, which folds the quotation I'm using into a sentence I constructed, nowhere lists the actual name of the author. So now I am free to include her name in the body of the in-text citation along with the page number 48 and the punctuation going after. Now, it is possible that this would not end my sentence, and if that's the case, then I would use whatever appropriate punctuation I need to, including none, if this sentence were to carry forward to complete my thought. Remember, when you are citing, your purpose is to explain what your reference is in the context of your thesis statement, which you can find in another video on my channel. That is how you cite a book or any resource with one author in text that has page numbers, again, whether it is an ebook, online, print, any format. So let's look at a different thing you might cite. Now we're going to cite a YouTube video. For the sake of argument, let's cite this video about writing a thesis. So I will be referring to this video, and I'm at the 1 minute 29 second mark of the video, and I am going to refer to content that appears in the next 10 seconds. So in this case, the citation will look like this. Again, same functionality. If I refer to the content creator in the body of my paper, such as, according to Professor Reboot, then the citation that I put at the end only is the minute mark of the video that I'm referencing. If, however, I do not refer to the content creator, just like with Dirksen, then the citation at the end will include both the content creator and the page number, like so. Now that I have finished my paraphrase, here I will put in the minute marker of the video for this particular piece. Again, if I do not refer to the content creator in my paraphrase, instead I say just simply a hook paragraph, then here I would put the content creator and the minute mark at the end. Next, let's look at how we cite two different sources from the same author. In this case, we are going to reference two sources from the poet Sylvia Plath, two different poems. So when you're citing a poem, unlike when you're citing a book, you cite by the line number. What that means is you look at the poem, you assign a number to each line, skipping the intentional white space between stanzas. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and so on. And then you would list the number of lines that you are citing. So if I am citing from Sylvia Plath's poem, Lady Lazarus, let's say I'm comparing and contrasting these two, I might say In a poetic reference, you use a forward slash to indicate a line break. Then you close the quotation, you write the author's last name, and then you list the numbers of the lines in the poem. So if you recall, these lines here are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So my in-text citation looks like Plath 4, 5, and 6. But now I want to compare this poetic verse to a poetic verse from another poem by the same author. First, I do need to make the adjustment to the layout. My spacing somehow got bumped out. You always need double spacing in your MLA paper. So now, because I am about to reference Plath again, I am going to go to a new poem by her and grab the lines I want to cite. And it did bump out my formatting again, but I'll go ahead and fix that. Remember to put the punctuation outside of the citation. Those were lines 1 and 2 from the separate poem. So again, because I am referring to two separate pieces by the same author, I have to actually indicate which comes from which in the creation of my in-text citation. So this first one comes from a poem called Lady Lazarus. The second one comes from a poem called Mad Girl's Love Song. Now, in MLA formatting, a shorter work such as a poem or an article is put in quotation marks with capital letters for each of the major words or proper nouns in the title, whereas a full-length book or a longer work like the New York Times, would be italicized and also capitalized. So Lady Lazarus is a poem, so I would put the name of that poem as part of my in-text citation, and then I would do the same with the other one, so that now my reader is able to distinguish when I am citing from Plath's poem Lady Lazarus versus when I am citing from Plath's poem A Mad Girl's Love Song. Now, let's imagine we are citing two works from authors who have similar last names. We're going to imagine that we have a work by someone named Louise Smith and someone else named Jack Smith. Well, because we have two authors who have similar last names, it's not enough for us to just treat it the same way we have been treating it. We actually will need to distinguish them somehow in our in-text citation. In an MLA 9th formatting style, you do that by using the author's first initial. So, for example, I might say, and I'm going to imagine that this is an HTML website, so there's no page number on it. And here we distinguish that separate person by adding that first initial. And this time we'll say that there is a page number. I got this from page 63. So as you can see, if I have two authors with the same last name, I do need to distinguish who is who by introducing their first initial in my in-text citation. This would refer to a piece of writing that does not have page numbers, like a website or a blog. And this would refer to a piece of writing that does. Now, the last thing I'll show you how to cite is what's called an institutional author. So occasionally you will come across a piece of writing that has no discernible author or individual author. It appears to come from an institution like Harvard. Or you might come across a piece of writing that has no discernible author, but isn't really necessarily coming from a distinguishable place, and so all you have is a title. In those cases, you would cite them based on the institutional author or the title. So you might say, now in this case, I am referring to a resource on the Harvard Writing Center website that I refer to often for writing ethical papers, which has, of course, no page numbers and no discernible singular author. So I would just refer to the institutional author of the Harvard Writing Center. Alternatively, if I'm citing a source that has no discernible author, including an institutional author, then I would cite it by the title. In this case, I'm referring to a source where it appears that the website just has a title, no discernible author, Ideally, I have already run this source through what's called the CRAP test to make sure that it is in fact an authoritative source. Otherwise, I should not be citing it. Now, the last thing I will say about citation, now that I've shown you how to perform in-text citations on a variety of sources, is that every single one of these needs to appear in my Works Cited page in alphabetical order. Now, Works Cited means your full bibliographical reference, and you will always match up whatever appears in your in-text citation for the first part, like Platt or Professor Reboot or Dirksen. You will always match that up as the first part of your entry in your Works Cited page. So you will want to make sure that you have all of those materials in here. Now, this is just the first part of the Works Cited references for each of the in-text citations that I just made. In order to see the full bibliographical citation, you'll need to watch a future video on how to construct those. It is very important that you know what type of source you are citing before you go down to cite your sources or make any effort to cite your sources. Do not use citation generators. They will steer you wrong until you know how to identify what type of source you have and what a proper citation looks like. And last but not least, citation is referred to a citation style guide, which means it is not a rule book or a law book, it is a guidebook. So if you have a professor who is telling you to add additional content or handle your in-text or bibliographic citations differently, you always listen to your professor or your publisher over the guide that is handed to you. The guide is there to provide a structural framework for your citations, but ultimately it is the person who is accepting your work or publishing your work who has the final say on what goes in your citations. Thank you.